Hey everybody, what is going on? Hexlex here with another Master Duel video. So today's video is going to be a little bit different. I'm going to be trying something a little bit new here. I'm kind of playing with the idea of like a title for this series just being like Duel Academy. That may or might not be in the actual video title. But I want to start a quote-unquote Duel Academy series, right, where we talk about not just like specific decks and getting better with that deck as we tend to do on this channel with profiles and gameplay videos, but rather going into more general advice, right? I just want to put out some more content that was more accessible for like a wider variety of players, because I feel like it's pretty easy to see a deck and be like, or a video and be like, oh, I don't play that deck, and then just, just not watch it there. But yeah, no, I wanted to just provide again, more like learning experiences for a wider swath of players. So I know deck building in particular, when it comes to like meta decks, can be a bit of a daunting task, like trying to figure out where to even get started with a deck that you're trying to like get into. And I figured I'd go ahead, as I was about to say. I figured I'd go ahead and show my process of how I go about building these decks kind of from scratch. So the deck we're going to be using as an example is one that I've recently been featuring here on the channel, and that is Virtual World. Now, obviously, I've already built that deck, and as you have seen, played with it a few times. But like I said, I wanted to show the process by which I go about that. Because I don't know, to me, this is just kind of the way I've been building decks of many different card games for quite a while now. But I don't know, I mean, everybody's got their own methods, right? So I figured I'd just float mine out there, and if it works for you, cool. If maybe some aspects of it work for you that you want to adopt to your way of building decks, go for that as well. But I figure it's best to just, it's always best to get new perspectives. So in addition to me sharing this video, if you guys in the comments want to share how you go about building your decks and the kind of research that you do when trying out a new deck for the first time, do share that in the comments, because I'm always interested, like I said, to just see other people's processes, especially your guys'. It's like you guys are always so great with your constructive criticism about deck building, that I figure, like, you guys gotta be doing something right, because you sure help me. So hopefully I can help you guys a bit in return here. So as you can see, we've got our blank slate here. Like I said, we are going to be building a Virtual World deck. So obviously the first step to building a deck is making sure you, well, own the cards. So yeah, I guess just search up Virtual World here and we see all the different options. You want to make sure, if you don't have it already set on, that you have the option, I think it's somewhere in here maybe. But basically you want to make sure that you're displaying cards that you don't own. So there are a few cards here for Virtual World that I haven't crafted, including this ultra rare. So you may be wondering, like, well, how can you be sure you've got the right build if you haven't even crafted all the cards? Well, there is a very, very easy way to do that, and it's a site that I have often referred to many a time, particularly for our metagame analysis, and that is, of course, going to be good old MasterDuelMeta.com. So here we are on the Virtual World deck breakdown page. If you're wondering how I got here, if you start from like the main site, right, and go to the tier list, and then click Virtual World, that'll take you right to the deck breakdown. If your deck is not like a deck that is on the tier list, what you can do is you can just go to top decks, and then odds are your archetype is going to be somewhere among these. If it's not, though, you could still try searching it up here. Excuse me, my throat is getting a little bit dry there, but like, let's say, for example, Thunder Dragon is the deck you wanted to build, From top decks, you could find Thunder Dragon. Over here, you can see sample lists. If you click any one of these sample lists, one of the options over here on the side is always going to be that deck's breakdown, and then that's how you can find your deck's appropriate breakdown there. But again, we're just doing Virtual World, so we can just find it this way: Virtual World deck breakdown. And this is going to be pretty key to building the deck, right? Because a lot of people use the term net decking in reference to like copying card for card one single build. But I don't often like doing it that way, especially with Master Duel, where we have the amount of data that we have in the form of these deck breakdowns, right? I'd rather pull inspiration from multiple lists rather than just a single one. So now there are some times where you see a single list and it just ends up being one that really, jives with you and you decide to build it. That's totally fine too. In that case, I think it's definitely best to try to see if that duelist has like tournament reports or a YouTube channel or maybe just more written guides or something. Basically, if you're building a specific list from a specific person, getting their perspective is definitely the way to go when it comes to running that list. It'll give you the most insight. So, but again, for my purposes, I generally prefer to look at the deck breakdowns as a whole here, because this is going to pull from not just one list, but all of the lists that have been submitted recently here to masterduelmeta.com. Excuse me, still dealing with those allergies, so might be coughing a bit, might sound a bit stuffy, but in any case here, so yeah, like we look at the top main deck cards, we see, Lulu's a 3 of in literally all the decks, Kowloon's a 3 of in literally all of the decks, Gigi's a 3 of in like pretty much all the decks, same with Lily, same pretty much with Ash. Looks like King Long is a little bit more varied, but 89% I'd still pretty much consider that a guaranteed 3 of. 96% 2 of Chu-Chi in decks, so that's fine. Nyan Nyan, 91%. Basically, if it's like about 90% or more, then I think it's generally best to assume that it's used that way in all decks. So using that criteria, and we'll count King Long's 89% as close enough to 90. I think that's close enough. So if a card is run, like I said, if a card is run the ratio in at least 90%, then I'm generally comfortable just going with that in my build. So that being the case here, let's go ahead and go back over to Master Duel, and we know that we're going to play 3 Lulus for sure, 3 Kowloons for sure, 3 of these, 3 of these, 2 of these, 2 of these, 3 of these, and 2 of these. And I believe that was all of the Virtual World cards anyway that were listed there. Yep, looks like that is the case. And there's also the Ashes and the Called Bys that are played, and the E-Tellies. So we'll go ahead and include those as well. So we'll go... Oops. You have to forgive me. I have to... Due to my desk setup right now, I have to kind of like reach around my keyboard in order to type. Or reach around my microphone in order to get to my keyboard. So it's a little awkward to type here. And then Called By, isn't that what I said? Yeah, and then... Teleport. Emergency teleports. Okay, so there's 28 of the 40 cards right there, right? That was pretty easy. And this looks pretty solid to me. Playing against Virtual World, we expect to see all these cards fairly frequently. So, I actually did forget the... let's see. Yeah, this gate right here. And then as long as we got the Virtual World cards up, we can also take a peek over at the... whoops. Let me switch over. Yeah, we can take a peek over at the extra deck here. And then we can see there's a 1 of Shen Shen and 100% builds. There's a 1 of Jiu. I never know how to pronounce that name. In 91% of builds. So as long as we're here on the Virtual World search, we can go ahead and add those as well. And now Fan, that's right. I knew there was one more extra deck monster I wanted to see. 87%, and it's on the uptrend. So 87% again, that's close enough to 90 for me that we can just go ahead and include that. So yeah, there's 29 main deck cards and 3 extra deck cards already down. And again, those are all just cards that are featured in at least 90% of builds at these ratios, which, again, that's a pretty safe estimate that that's just the optimal ratio to play. From then on, it gets a little bit more nuanced, and then you have to be a little bit more opinionated, I guess, about what cards are going to include. So let's pop on back over to Master Duel Meta and look at the deck breakdown here. So Max C looks like 3 of in 69, pretty much 70% of builds, 2 of and basically the other 30%. So it's a matter of Max C. Do we want to run 2 or 3? I pretty much always prefer 3 Max C. You can get away with 2 Max C, but this card is so powerful, it's just no reason not to play 3 copies of it, especially in a best of 1 format. This card is at worst Upstart Goblin. But even then, even when it's only Upstart Goblin, it's often more than that. It's still Upstart Goblin that also ends your opponent's turn, which is really good. Sometimes your opponent just plays Fusion Destiny, and then it just kind of feels more like an Upstart Goblin, because DPE is already a really strong boss monster to end on. It only takes one special summon, but... Well, assuming you're just activating Fusion Destiny and not, you know, summoning Vert Anaconda. In any case, though... Maxi, I generally play 3 of in just about every deck. Honestly, most decks start off at like 32 cards as opposed to 40 for me, because I'll generally play 3 Maxi, 3 Ash Blossom, and then the 2 Called By. I'll play these cards in like literally just about every single deck I ever play, so that already makes the deck building process definitely a bit easier in that regard. Now, actually, I wanted to look over here at the extra deck. Let's include all the other extra deck stuff that's like pretty much staples before we go into more optional stuff in the main deck. Let's kind of just take this as a whole. So, okay, so we're seeing like, let's go back over here. The Stardust Charge Warrior, definitely a needed card in this deck. The Croco, that should be enough, right? Yeah. What else was there? I should know this off the top of my head. Of course, VFD, Cloud Castle, Vermilion Dragon Mech, Coral Dragon Zeus. Yeah, okay, so... There's the Vermilion Mech. Oops. So yeah, like I said, we're pretty much just, pulling all of the most obvious stuff from the list here. And again, that's actually going to solve a lot of the deck building process for you. But this is also why you want to be looking at the deck breakdown as opposed to just singular lists, because you never know. You could be looking at one of the fringe lists that's like one of the 2% of decks that's not playing Vermilion Dragon Mech. And you might not see this as like a quote-unquote staple of the extra deck if you only had that one list to pull from. This is also why I would advise against like... not only just picking one player that's like one list online, but I see a lot of people be like, oh, well, my friend is definitely the virtual world expert, and they always play it this way, so I'm always going to take their advice over anybody else's. Just any kind of mindset that ends up limiting you is definitely one that I think is best to avoid when it comes to deck building. And I do have to admit that includes, I've not seen it, you know, as much in recent years, nearly as much, but especially, you know, like, back in the old days, there were so many people who are so staunch against quote-unquote net decking, which I kind of alluded to earlier, right? As the practice of finding one list online and copying it card for card and then playing it. Here's the thing, right? One of the life lessons that I kind of like, I don't know, I guess live by is that you're always going to have to make choices in life. You always have to make decisions. You have to compromise. You can't have it all. You can never have it all. You're going to have to compromise. And I think a lot of people want it all in that they want to make their own original homebrew that is also going undefeated in every tournament and, you know, getting Diamond 1 in a few hours every season. And I gotta be honest with you, that's never going to happen. I shouldn't say never. It's extremely, very, very extremely unlikely, almost 0% chance that that's ever going to happen. That there's just a sleeper deck that is that undiscovered, that it's OP against the whole meta, and nobody's ever found it. Like, you just think of how many people put how many hours into this game. If that kind of deck existed, it would be already tier 1. And that is what the tier 1 decks are, like Sword Soul Tenyi, Trizu, all that stuff. Like, those are those decks that are just taking most advantage of the format, of the card pool, and then in turn of the meta. Now, you can still build anti-meta decks that'll do particularly well against the meta specifically, that maybe not a lot of people are using. Just know that if you do that, you're running the risk of then kind of pigeonholing yourself so that you're not anywhere near as effective against decks that aren't tier 1 decks, which especially in Master Duel in particular, in this format of Ranked Ladder, where we see such a variety of decks, I don't really think you can afford to play like... But even I think that's even true of tournaments too. You tend to see a pretty big variety of decks. I think that mindset comes from this idea, both in terms of wanting to play a deck that specifically counters the meta, and in terms of hating the idea of the meta. I think that idea specifically tends to come from the idea that like the meta is just the same repetitive thing, the same 1 or 2 decks over and over again. And that's really only true in like quote-unquote tier 0 formats. And even then, there's still value in those tier 0 formats, but like no meta that I've experienced in Master Duel so far is anywhere near like that, in my opinion. So I don't know, I wanted to include that little blurb at some point. Now, if you want to build your own, you know, brews and not like pull from Master Duel meta lists or deck breakdowns or anything like that, I'm not saying that's a bad thing, and don't let me stop you. Just know that you are going to be starting at a disadvantage, and it is a disadvantage you can avoid. Now, there is merit to fighting through that disadvantage yourself and arriving at the same place everybody else. That's the thing though, like, even once you fight through that, you're kind of just arriving at the same place everybody else is already at when they're looking at these deck breakdowns, which is generally why I advise kind of against doing that if you're particularly building like a meta deck. But if it's an off meta deck, it's a little bit of a different story. But anyway, I just wanted to go into that little tangent, I guess, there. In any case, let's go ahead and keep building this deck. So I believe now, if we look back at Master Duel Meta's deck breakdown, okay, that's just about everything in the main and extra deck that sees play in at least 90% of virtual decks across the site, are these 32 main deck cards and 9 extra deck cards. So again, we're seeing here that about you know, the majority of the deck kind of quote-unquote builds itself in that regard. But we do still have some tech choices to make, and some of our main deck choices are going to be dependent on the extra deck, so let's maybe focus on the extra deck a little bit first here. Now, let's see. The trending arrows are a very nice indication of what may be useful in the most recent you know, meta in particular, as we're seeing certain cards see upticks in play and other cards see downticks. Like, for example, we're seeing the Crystal Wing and Ultimate Zulkin engine lose a little bit of popularity here. They're still actually seeing play. That's more than I thought, 70% of decks. However, for me personally, and this is another thing I like to do when I'm building a deck that I'm trying for the first time, is, and I touched upon this in another Virtual World video, but you know, I really prefer to only, if I'm first starting off with a new deck and I just want to see how much I actually like playing it, I won't craft all the like fringe options if they're ultra rares. I'll kind of just work with the base build and then go from there and see how I like it. So that's why I haven't crafted Crystal Wing or Ultimate Zulkin just yet. Is I'm going to see how much I like Virtual World, and then maybe I'll do a little bit more research and watch some gameplay with some builds that feature these cards, just to see how their you know, board states end up differing from mine, and if I think that's a weakness that my build could be more effective at addressing. But given the fact, again, that they're seeing a downward trend in popularity, I've noticed these cards tend to fluctuate a bit in Virtual World in particular, so that tells me that they're definitely optional, and that definitely tells me as well that they might not be the most sound investment for the time being, even if they do end up being, you know, fairly decent cards in their own right. So that being the case, let's look at some cards that are seeing upticks in popularity, like Zeus in particular is up to 93%. I think this was at like 85 or something when I first built this deck. But given that it's also seeing upticks in popularity, or given that it's seeing upticks in popularity, so also we are seeing Gaia Dragon see upticks in popularity, as this card is pretty much exclusively played in this deck as a another material for Zeus. Like, if you detach both of your units on Fan, you can then attach Gaia Dragon and then Zeus and have a 2-material Zeus, even though you had a 0-material Fan to start off with. So we'll definitely add the Gaia Dragon. Looks like Ptolemy M7 is also seeing an uptick in play and is at 80%, so we'll definitely go ahead and add that as well. That also probably works pretty well with Gaia Dragon and Zeus once you've used the materials there, or even just one of the materials to get like a 3-material Zeus or something. So yeah, we can go ahead and add the Gaia Dragon as well as the M7. Oops, just clicking on the wrong icon there. Okay, so let's see. Given that we're not playing this engine and we have, what, 4 spots left in the extra deck? Oops, I keep clicking the wrong tab here. Okay, here we go. No, Alright, I just need to make sure I can see everything. Alright, so Master Duel meta, we're back here again. We're going to finish the extra deck now. So, we've already included these cards. We decided we're not going to include Crystal Wing and Ultimate Zulkin just yet. So that being the case, we should probably be including the Gossip Shadow and the Utopia Beyond, as they are featured in quite a bit of decks here. Now, Utopia Beyond is seeing a decline in play, which I do understand. In my own testing, I've never really made this card, and the scenarios where it's useful are kind of niche. Basically, if your opponent has a bunch of monsters in attack mode on the board, you can make this and then potentially OTK your opponent by reducing all of their attacks to 0. But like I said, that is a pretty niche scenario, so I actually want to, at this point now, start looking at deck lists, because I know I said I was going to copy from any one deck list, and I was mostly going to rely on the deck breakdowns. However, there is still merit in looking at deck lists themselves. But again, I'm not going to pull from any one deck list. I want to look at multiple deck lists. But fortunately, Master Duel Meta has a very, very nice feature here, right? Where not only on their deck breakdown page, they feature a sample deck that is actually a real deck from a that topped a tournament. It'll even tell you which tournament it topped and what date and who the player was and all that stuff. But they'll also feature all of the most recent decks that have either done well on ladder or done well in tournaments. So that's really, really nice that you can just, and if you're on the right browser, you can even just hover over them to look at the list. You don't even have to actually click on the deck itself. So, excuse me. So we do want to make the important distinction of like laddering decks versus tournament decks. Tournament decks are always going to be built differently. They might feature side decks, but even if they don't, tournament metas are much different than ladder metas. So we'll focus on the decks that have seen or that have done well on ladder. So we look at this, hover over this list here. And okay, we see this list is not playing the Crystal Wing, Ultimate Zulkin. So let's go ahead and take a look at their extra deck. I'm particularly looking at their extra deck more than like the main deck right now, because that's where we're focusing on. So they're playing the Gossip Shadow. They're playing the Break Sword. Okay, playing all the synchros we are. They're also playing this Jaja Virtual World Shell. Actually, what does this do again? Once per turn, you can detach feelings. Yeah, that's definitely not bad. It's not that great, but it's not bad. I can see it as a fringe option. Yeah, I mean, the rest of this looks pretty standard, but okay, so, again, just getting a good idea. We'll look at the main deck a little bit while we're here, too. Okay, so they're playing 3 Desires and 3 Cross-Eye Designator. That's pretty interesting. What did they cut? Because I only found room for 2 of each in my build. And they're playing the Psy-Frames. Wait, what are they playing that I'm not? That actually really has me curious. That's the other thing, too. Why I like looking at other people's builds even after I've already finished mine. I don't think they're playing... Hang on. No, yeah, they're playing E-Tailing and Call By. Of course they would be. Huh. Yeah, no, but this is why I like looking at other people's builds, right? Is because I just like getting this idea of what other people are trying. Oh, they're playing 42 cards. That's how they have room for all these. Okay, that makes more sense. I was trying to figure out how they had a room for all these cards. Okay, that definitely makes more sense. But, yeah, so then we'll take a look at some other lists here. Okay, that one's playing Crystal Wing and Ultimate Zulkin in the extra, so it's not going to be as relevant to us. So is that one and that one. Okay, looks like Ultimate Zulkin and Crystal Wing might be better on ladder than in tournaments, which is interesting if true. Now we can definitely still take a peek at these tournament lists as well. It's not like they're going to be completely irrelevant to us. Again, we just have to be mindful that they are going to be different in those regards. So it looks like they're playing the Break Sword, the Gossip Shadow, the Utopia Beyond. Okay. That one's playing Zulkin, and oh, that's the, yeah, okay. Okay, that one's playing Zulkin and Crystal Wing. Okay, so if we don't want to play Zulkin and Crystal Wing, it looks like, if we come back over here, it looks like the Gossip Shadow, the Utopia Beyond, and what was the last one? There's another Exceed monster. Oh, Break Sword, duh. Alright, that does still leave us with one extra deck spot. We'll just fill that in here in a little bit. Let's focus a bit more on the main deck now. We still have 8 cards to put in. We've already got our core dex engine as well as our basic like hand traps here. You know what's funny is I might actually end up landing on a slightly different build than the first one I did that I actually showed off in those other videos. But when I'm updating decks, this is also the way I like to do it, right? I don't like to take and this is just the way that I find it most helpful to me personally. But if I'm going to update a deck, I usually just rebuild it from the ground up as opposed to making certain adjustments, because then I find myself like narrowing my own mental space of like, oh, well, if I take this card out, I should sub it for this card as a good replacement. But I don't think that's really the best way to think about updating a deck. I think it's generally better to build from the ground up and get a new fresh perspective on it. I actually want to save this real quick because I'm trying to figure out what this last extra deck card that I don't play, or that I play in my other build is. I must have forgotten a synchro or something, because I'm not seeing anything I don't... Oh, it's VFD. I never included VFD. Yep, it's not in here. I was like, what the... I was like, what the hell is this last card? No, that's definitely a very needed card. It should have been... It's because I thought I already included all the 90% or above cards, but I forgot the True King of all calamities there. So, okay. Now we have our extra deck to 15. That was just bugging me a little bit. I want to make sure we address that. But, okay. So yeah, now like I said, we have the leftover 8 cards. So let's pop on back over to Master Duel Meta and look at the virtual world breakdown here. You see, we have a whole suite of tech cards that are seeing an increase of play here. I really like Nibiru and Crossout in this deck. So I definitely want to add those. If you're playing 3 Max C, I've said this so many times, but I think it bears repeating. If you're playing 3 Max C, odds are you should probably be playing a Nibiru as well. Because if your opponent decides to take your Max C challenge and, you know, summons like 10 times to give you 10 draws, well, drawing 10 cards doesn't really do you any good if they're just going to kill you. Because you aren't playing a way to stop them from... you know, stop their board once they've summoned a bunch of monsters. So Nibiru is definitely the best way to do that. And again, I think if you're playing 3 Max C, you should probably be playing 1 Nibiru. The vast majority of decks should be doing that. Similarly, if you're going to be playing... Here we go, good old Crossout Designator. I'll play at least 2 of those. Then you should definitely be playing a Nibiru as well. Basically, Crossout Designator wants to hit any card that... you know, obviously you want to be playing cards that you want to hit with Crossout Designator, and you know, Nibiru is definitely one of this deck's kind of weaknesses here. That's another thing to definitely be mindful of when you're deck building, especially when you're picking tech options for Crossout Designator specifically. You got to think about, like, okay, what cards are going to hamper my deck most, right? So in the case of like Sword Souls and Tenyis, where we include like an Effect Veiler and Infinite Permanence in our deck, because those cards really, really hurt Sword Souls, and we want to be able to cross out those cards. With the case of Virtual World is actually not really impacted by cards like Veiler and Imperm, basically onboard effect negations, because all of our combo pieces, like all of our main deck Virtual World monsters, activate in the hand. So really the only thing that the Veiler and Imperm are going to stop are some of our extra deck effects, but even then, like, not all of those get totally stopped, so... Excuse me, we definitely don't need to be playing Veiler here. Could still be a good idea to play Imperm. I actually wonder... Okay, so Imperm is actually seeing a downward trend here a little bit. Huh, and even... Wow, most of the time... Oops, sorry about that. It's only played as 1 copy. That's interesting. Huh, you know, I might actually... I think this build might actually end up being a little bit different, because I was playing 2 Imperm and a Feather Duster in my build that I showed off in those last couple of videos, but they're definitely seeing far less play than even the last time I looked up this deck breakdown for when I actually did build my Virtual World deck. Like, Feather Duster was definitely closer to like 45% last time I looked, I'm pretty sure. And Imperm I thought saw more 2 of. So maybe I'll try taking these out for these Psy-Frames, which are seeing a lot more increased play. Yeah, you know what? And that would actually help shore up the weakness of going second a lot better than imperm, I think. And because this hurts us more than imperm, it's a better crossout. Okay, I've actually convinced myself here. So, it's actually kind of neat that I got to do this live. I got to kind of show the process of not only how I build my decks, but how I update them as well. So, okay, so yeah, I've convinced myself that the... Actually, here, let me look up the word frame. I think that's going to give me fewer. You have to be careful with what you look up or how you search in Master Duel. If I looked up psi, it would have given me like every psychic monster too. But okay, by looking up frame, we get the psi frames. That's good. Okay, so we have 2 more spots left. And what do we say we're going to use them on? Oh yeah, I was thinking about using them on 2 desires, which... Looks like about 80% of decks in general are playing desires. That's another thing I like to look at here, is not just the most prominent percentile to ratio statistic, but also hovering over to see, like in general, you know. Because for example, you might see like, oh, only 41%, so, but that doesn't mean only 41 decks play desires. If you hover over it, you see, oh, 35% play 3 of, and, you know, 2% play 1 of, which leaves a 22% playing 0 of, which means pretty much 80% of decks are virtual decks are playing some amount of Pot of Desires. And with good reason. I mean, if we look at our build here, you know, we're not seeing many one-ofs. The one-ofs we are seeing are just, you know, hand traps like, you know, the Nibiru or maybe the Psi-Frame stuff. All of our important combo pieces are seeing play in 2 or 3 of. So this deck can definitely get away with playing Desires, and the extra draws are also really nice. If we don't play Desires, then maybe we could play like a Feather Duster, maybe we could play Imperms. I actually do kind of want to keep Feather Duster. We could just play 41 cards. Or we could just go down to 2 King Long. Although I don't know about that. I actually like having 3 quite a bit. We can just try it without Feather Duster. Maybe we play Sword Soul without Feather Duster and it's fine. We'll just play 2 Desires. Okay, so now before I finalize the build, or rather commit that this is going to be the build that I'll playtest, I like to give it one last look over. It's funny how I always read the deck list card by card at the start of every video, right before I duel. And part of the reason I do that is because when I'm working on a deck, I'll do the same thing. I'll just go through the list card by card, and then that really causes you to stop and give pause to each of the cards that are in your deck. It'll make you think about the roles they play and how necessary they are. And if you're having trouble like figuring out what to spot to like remove from a deck, like if you want to include a new card and you're trying to figure out what to take out for it, then I think that's one of the best ways to go about it, is just looking at your list card by card and just trying to figure out, okay, what is this card's role? How does it help my game plan? How does it hinder my game plan? Is it a quote-unquote win more card? A win more card is a card that like is only good when you're already ahead and doesn't help at all when you're behind. Cards like that aren't always bad, but generally speaking, they're called win more cards because, well, you're already in a winning state when you're playing it, so it's not really necessary. I'm trying to think of a good example for Virtual Worlds, but like with other decks, it might be like running a Garnet for a combo that's not necessary but is like fancy. You know, it's like, well, maybe the consistency of that extra Garnet in your deck makes the combo you're going for not worth it if it's just an additional combo on top of an already functional play, you know. But no, this main and extra deck are looking pretty good to me, so we will call this one, I guess because this is a minor update to the deck. Oops. Again, I have to reach around my microphone in order to type here. We'll call this Virtual World build like 1.2, you know? No, maybe 1.1. Well, you know what? So this is such an arbitrary how I determine this point thing, but I usually like to base it on like how many cards have been swapped in and out, or if like a major engine has been changed. I don't know, I'll just put 1.2, why not? We took out a decent amount of cards to fit in the Psi frames here, so we'll go ahead and click the old Save Arena button on that, and then of course the most important part, quote unquote, is the accessories here. We always got to make sure we have our proper accessories equipped. But I will offer one more piece of like actual good wisdom here. We're gonna go back over to the web browser here, because there are a couple more tools. Now that we've built the deck, we still obviously want to learn how to play it as well, right? And there's a few different things you can go about doing that. One is going to be found once again here on masterduelmeta.com. Most meta decks, or even not even just meta, but like popular decks in general, will have a guide to them, and they'll usually be linked on their deck breakdown page right here. You could also just go to guides here and then just type it, like search type it there. But again, if you're already on the deck breakdown page to get ideas for the build, you should be able to find it just by scrolling down. Usually it's under the secret packs here. As you can see, they have a whole guide for the introduction to Virtual World. I highly recommend, even if you think you already know the deck pretty well, to just, and not just for Virtual World, but for any deck in particular, you know, just reading through and making sure that you're aware of like the roles of all the cards in the decks and how they function. And then more often than not, these, once you scroll to the bottom after they talk about all the cards, you'll find deck lists and then combo guides. So if you want to look up combo guides, now these are in text form, which I personally, you know, everybody learns a little bit differently, right? I personally find it better to learn by watching a combo rather than reading how it's done. That's why I structure my combo guide videos the way I do, because I just, you know, I want to put out a format that, you know, I think would have most helped. Basically, I'm putting out the kind of combo guide that I want to see, right? Which is visual in engine, just helps me memorize it better, and just offering, like, you know, you do this to do this and go into this, just commentary on top of it. You know, that said, I can obviously still read this and get the gist of how the combos work just fine, but I prefer the videos myself. But if you operate better just reading it, then, you know, you can have, or if you just want it on the side while you're practicing the deck to quickly refer to, then you can take a look at combos here. Again, this is typically found towards the bottom of just about any one of these guides here on Master Duel Meta. Another thing you can do is, if we go over to like YouTube here, you can see I've already searched Virtual Master Duel, and then just hit the search button, and then these are the results that come up. However, with YouTube in particular, you do want to be mindful, actually not just of YouTube, but of these MasterDuelMetaGuides.com or MasterDuelMeta.com guides as well. You want to be mindful of when these videos and guides were published, because obviously as time goes on, metas shift, builds shift as a result, especially as new cards start coming out. Now you might be saying like, well, Virtual World doesn't really use DPE or any of the new cards, so I could still grab a list from like before, right? In theory, yeah, you could, but it wouldn't be as conducive or helpful as a more current list, because even if they aren't adding any new cards, decks like Virtual World are still adjusting their deck ever so slightly and their tech options in order to counter the current meta, which is probably why we're seeing a downtrend of like, or whether the downtrends and the uptrends that we're seeing are a result of that. So, like this guide, for example, we see published on January 23rd, but it was also updated on June 12th, which was 10 days ago at the time of recording this. So we can assume this guide is very up to date and is still relevant to our purposes. Now with YouTube, if you're looking for videos, you'll want to pay extra attention to the date. Like I mentioned here we see 3 months ago, 4 months ago, 3 months ago, 3 months ago, 4 months ago. So these lists, or these videos, are not going to be factoring in the current meta. What you can do is you can go to filters here. I usually like to go within the last month, and then just kind of like leave on the relevance filter. You could go by upload date if you want to see like all the most recent videos, but then of course there might be sometimes a bit of a quality issue there. You know, relevant is usually one of the best ways to go. We'll show you, you know, videos that are pretty popular and tend to be pretty good as far as like being informative and all that stuff goes. You could search by view count, but you know, when you do that, yeah, you kind of run the risk of running into videos that like are still good videos, but are not like necessarily how to play this deck. You know, you still see one like here, for example, but otherwise you might just see other results. So typically, if I'm doing a search for YouTube videos, yeah, I like to search by relevance in the last month or so. All right, let's go click back over here, take another look at this build, and go ahead and end off the video. Wow, I actually ended up going on for quite a bit longer than I thought I was going to. Yeah, that's pretty much it. That's more or less the process I go through when it comes to building my decks. Oh, right, there was one other thing I wanted to talk about, and that is for... Well, you know what, actually, God, if I went into that, that could almost be its own video, now that I think about it. I was going to talk about, like, speculative deck building, or putting together a list for cards that haven't come out yet. You know what? We could actually do that when Adventures in Flanders get announced. That would be the perfect time to do that. So, yeah, if you want to see that video, let me know. If you have any more ideas for other Duel Academy style videos, I would love to hear those as well. Because, yeah, I really like the idea of sharing more general knowledge that can be applied to more of the viewers. So, obviously, you as the viewers letting me know what you want to see is one of the best ways that we can go ahead and accomplish that. So, yeah, I think that's about all I've got for this one. As always, I want to thank you very much for watching to the very end of the video like this. That is very, very helpful to the channel. It means a lot to me. Same as if you're subscribing, also very helpful. Also means a lot to me, and is also just the best way to stay up to date of my latest videos, which do come out every day. So if you subscribe, you have daily Master Duel videos to look forward to. And then I also love to hear from you guys in the comments, as I mentioned earlier. Just getting your guys' feedback is always helpful, and I have probably one of the best comment sections I've ever seen on YouTube. Honestly, I do. Like, I'm not even just saying that. I'm just always pleasantly amazed by just how little toxicity in general there is in my comments. You guys are awesome. Definitely keep it up. But yeah, I think that's about all I've got for this one. So without further ado, this is XLex signing out. Hope you guys have a fantastic day.